Central would like to welcome you to the Real Authentic People podcast, also known as the R.A.P with
Roberto,
Atong, and as you can see, we're missing our little P, Paige. She's stuck on the west side, but we do have a special guest for you this week. Their names are Tiffany and Amira. They'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amira. I'm one of the doctoral interns at Student Counseling Center.
And my name is Tiffany, as she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the full-time staff there at the Counseling Center as well.
Great. Thank you for coming on to our show. We really appreciate it. Really.
just a little nervous, you know. This is the first time having guests, so.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to be here, so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad. So I do have not a couple of questions for you, but just like a bit of a question. Well, that was a tongue twist. But what is it that you do on campus? Like, what is it that you do? Like, who do you usually work with? Like, what is your like main demographic essentially?
So we work with a lot of people. We work with students. We've worked with faculty members. We've worked with different departments on campus. So we do a combination of things. So for students specifically, we do more therapy, whether it's individual. We provide couples counseling if both partners go to school here. Mm-hmm. And we also do some group work, group counseling, and we provide some workshops. We also, in terms of outreach, will work with different departments at the university to try and provide mental health resources or some type of education around mental health needs, access, things like that. We work with different organizations on campus to make sure students have resources and things they need, like healthcare, food, clothing, whatever it may be. Am I missing something? I
think you nailed it.
All right. Sweet.
I did not know we offered like couples therapy. I mainly thought it was like centered around students, but I was like, that's the new one. I did not know.
Students are dating. So
That's true. That's true. I did not know that. Wow. That would be like a new thing you have to promote, because I legit just thought it was like for just like students, you know? And I was like, oh, that is new. Well, you learn something new every day.
Absolutely.
Something new every day. So like, what is like how would you personally like define like therapy on your own terms?
Yeah, I mean, really, therapy is sitting with a trained professional to unpack challenges that you may be facing, figuring out paths to growth, maybe that you have not previously thought of. Sometimes it's about working through things that have happened in the past. Sometimes it's about focusing on a goal that you want to hit in the future. But really, it's trying to help people get in touch with their inner self, find their own strengths, help them to just become the people that they want to be.
Is that how you would also define it, Miyar?
I think so. I think she covered basically everything.
And that's really boiled down. I'm making it sound like, oh, that's so easy.
Anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it.
Just do
Even
it.
you could do therapy.
Like skipping through the forest.
Listen, go on therapy TikTok, and that's it.
That's it.
got
You're done.
Yeah, you're part of the
5
club.
signs you have ADHD.
Oh my god.
Do you eat too much or eat too little? It could be that.
Yeah.
Do you watch Friends all the time?
You might be autistic. Like if you like have like a certain pattern, like you just might be.
Just might be.
But it's
yeah.
not like we all have patterns.
Oh my goodness. I do want to say though, it's work. So one thing it's important to note that if you are looking to just have someone blanketly agree with everything that you do all of the time, that's probably not gonna turn out well for you in therapy. Therapy is meant to challenge you to grow, right? So that often comes with discomfort, and it often comes with looking at things differently than you may have looked at them before. So I do want to put that plug out, because people will be like, oh, just come sit in this chair and just talk, and then I leave. And it's like, no, it's like a little bit more to that than it seems.
I always tell my clients it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
You're going to feel a little bit worse because you're going to be unpacking some stuff that you probably haven't addressed in years. And yeah, that's why we start with self-compassion and self-care, because healing is not linear. It's a journey, and it sucks sometimes. We talk about it like it's an easy romanticized things, like look at my aromatherapy and look at my yoga mat and the candles, and I'm healing. And no, healing is hard. So
But I will say this. Shout out to the counseling center, because I was really broke and I could still attend therapy, and it really helped me figure out like, oh, hey, even if, you're struggling financially, getting help is number one, so.
Well, and here's the secret. You already paid for it. So I tell people all the time who are nervous or reluctant to get involved with therapy. It's like, listen, when you pay your student fees, therapy is included in that. And so whether you use it or not, you're still going to pay for it. So you might as well take advantage of it.
That's very true. One thing I've heard like people say is because I'm mainly hanging around like POCs, is like they usually like want to book with, you're really popular among the POCs on campus here. So they're like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to book with Tiffany, I'm trying to book with Tiffany, I'm trying to book with Tiffany. I'm like, oh, why? And they're usually like, oh, well, I can identify with Tiffany. I think that's one of the major factors in therapy. It's like finding someone that you can identify with. I know if December had kind of mentioned that because, Amira, you are like Muslim identifying person. So I was like, she was like, oh my gosh, like, that's like someone who I can see myself in and can like see like who I am and like understand me. And so do you guys also come across that when you have like patients of such demographics?
Yeah. Go ahead, Amir.
Yeah, I think specifically within like the Muslim community or other Arabs that I've spoken to, one of the biggest things that keeps people from seeing a counselor is just the distress of possibly having to be with somebody who doesn't understand or respect your cultural experiences or your religious beliefs, and having to spend, you have an hour session, spending like 25 minutes explaining the cultural context and then getting to the crux of what's happening, worrying about being discriminated against. And I think that's a very common and pretty valid concern. So I do come across a lot of it. And it's one of the reasons I got really interested in psychology too, because I noticed that was something that was, I could either notice that this situation happened or become part of the solution, which is why I'm pretty passionate about this work. So.
Yeah. And, I'll talk about the experience here at Central. I mean, we know that faculty and staff of color are in the minority in terms of numbers, right? And that is true in our clinic as well. But I will say, for folks who don't know, who aren't aware, we really do put an emphasis on trying to serve all people, right? And so that means our own education is happening apart from the work that we're doing. And that's not to say that we're always going to get it perfect, because I don't believe that there's a such thing. But we're going to try really hard to serve all students here. Generally, these are good questions, though, when you're thinking about going to therapy, thinking about who might I be working with? What are my values? Can I find someone who shares said values? Sometimes that works out great. Other times it doesn't. And sometimes it has to do with just where you are. Shout out to our colleagues, again, some of whom are not people of color, and they are doing really good work. So one thing I want to encourage folks is, like, if you're serious about trying therapy, yes, ask these questions about identity, shared identity points. But also, you can do some vetting, interview the people you might want to work with before you hit the door, right? Just ask them questions. You can ask about our experience working with, students of color. You can ask about how do you navigate difference when it comes up in session, right? You can ask about openness. You can ask pretty much anything you want. The clinician has the right to decline, but sometimes declining to answer maybe tells you something, right? So doing your research, doing your homework about who you might want to meet with is a good and wonderful thing, and it's much more likely to lead to a good client-clinician match, which is where the magic happens. If you're not vibing with your therapist, it ain't going to work.
That's really
Also, it's your space. I mean, I think, like, when we think about therapy, you're talking to somebody, we tend to look at it the way we would other relationships we have, whether it's with a family member or a friend. But you're not going to sit your friend across from you and be like, okay, so you're white. I need to know how informed you are before I allow you into my inner circle. Like, it's with a therapist, you can have that conversation, and it's welcome. So a typical conversation you may not normally have with a friend or a peer, you can definitely have with your therapist and be like, all right, here are my identities. How are we going to do this? And you can have that conversation pretty openly. And if something does happen in which the therapist crosses a line, you can call it out.
Absolutely.
And how the therapist responds gives you a lot of insight into whether or not this is a relationship that is going to help you or not. So I think it's always important to keep that at the forefront. It's your time. It's your space. If you're not seeking it at student counseling, it is your money. You're paying for it through tuition. It's still your money. So honor that and be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. No, because I'm, in all honesty, the first time I went to therapy here at Central, I didn't know how like the payment or all that works. So I was just like, okay, if I go in and if I don't have money and we're done with the session, are they going to re-traumatize me because,
Yeah.
you know, the card got declined? But I think it's very important that you get therapy from someone you can like trust with what you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. If you don't have that feeling, I would say and Amir used this word relationship, right? So this is a relationship. Most new relationships are like, it takes a minute. You might not 100% feel like this is my person.
Right.
Maybe it takes one session, you know? However, if you know for a fact in your gut this ain't gonna work, don't fake the funk. Just keep it moving and go find what's gonna work for you. I want to encourage people that just like any other kind of relationship, also if you try and it doesn't work, don't be afraid to try again, because that is something that happens. People have not a great connection with their therapist, and they're like, "Oh, therapy's garbage, it's trash, la la la. I'm not gonna do this." You had a bad experience, I will 100% honor that. That doesn't mean you can't have a great one with someone else.
Right. I think I also had to learn that because I started like some therapy when I was in high school, but it was like they started with like you start with like the in-school counseling one, and then within school, then they find you one. And I had a terrible experience with the one the school found me. So I was like, until I met like my new therapist one, she's real sweet. She's Kenyan, so I was like, me and her, like I think something people have in mind about therapy is like you always have to go talk about your issues, which is really not, because with mine, sometimes I'm like, I don't really want to talk about it, but I do want to tell you one of my new hobbies that I'm currently obsessed with. And I will fill you in on what. So, like, therapy, I feel like it's like a place where you can, like, decompress or, like, learn how to better navigate the emotions that you are feeling at that time, whether you want to address those emotions or not just address them, or just have, like, someone to, like comfort, I want to say. Because they will comfort you, but, like, I don't know how to say this. It's, like, still, like, this level of, like, I know that you have to do this, but it's like, thank you. And I appreciate what it is that's going on right now.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's a good point. Something else to just be mindful of. If therapy is, again, like, I'm only talking about my hobbies, I'm only talking about, right? Then it's probably not helping you advance, right? But there has to be some space for that, too. There has to be space for things that are a little lighter, where you don't have to get super, super deep, right? And for a variety of reasons that happens. But I'm glad that you found a therapist who honors that and it makes you feel like you want to continue to engage, right?
I'm like, when I know, like, I have a session that week, I'm like, I'm looking forward to the session.
Yeah.
Because I always leave having figured out something, or like how to address whatever it is that I'm feeling, whether it's not like whatever it is that I'm initially in therapy for, or like it's something else that I'm experiencing within that time, while also trying to figure out that old trauma. So I'm like, oh, this is something new, and I can learn to like navigate this thing that I'm going through right now, but it's sort of like this past thing. Because a friend of mine, she described like not trauma, but like going through some stuff as a house. Like if the foundation of the house is destroyed, like other parts of your life are also gonna have cracks in it. Like other rooms are gonna have cracks because it's going to affect other parts of your life. And so when you do like figure out something new about yourself, it might like have some sort of crack within the foundation already that's like affecting this new house. So like as you're slowly developing yourself and fixing it, you'll experience like new emotions. I feel like, for at least for me, therapy is the way that I learned to navigate that new emotion that I'm feeling, because I don't know how to handle it in the moment. You know?
That makes total sense. Yeah.
But but like, what are like this is mainly for Roberto, and then you guys can give your input. Like, what are like some external or internal stuff that you mainly struggle, like you see happening within campuses, on campus for students?
I think with campuses, it's just the participation of also the students, because a lot of students are like, oh, I wish I had time to do all this, but I'm so busy with that. It's like, yes, there's moments where you're busy, but then if you're so busy and so overwhelmed, you can get burnt out unless you have like a specific outlet. So maybe making the time to actually like sit down, get an appointment, get some counseling, get some therapy going would be nice. Like just have like an hour and a half of your time. Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to decompress for 30 minutes, then I'm going to go to therapy, then I'm going to speak on what's happening, this and that. But I think mainly it's just like, I wouldn't say publicity, really. I think it would be just more participation from students.
Yeah, because I know like a lot of students usually feel like a lot of like internal pressures, right? Like they're like, oh, they have classes depending on like the workload gets crazy.
Plus clubs.
And then they got like things on the side. So like oftentimes like, oh, how do I navigate this? Or like there's a lack of community, so they feel lonely in that sense. So like, how do you guys like usually like see that develop in people?
I mean, for me, and Amira will be able to speak to her experiences, and I think I would trust actually Amira's perspective because she has fresher eyes.
Right.
I've been here around Central for a couple of years now, and sometimes we get a little cloudy, you know what I mean, right? So for me, for sure, it's the balancing of the schedules, people feeling overextended and feeling like they don't have the ability to prioritize their wellness because they have 50 million other things they need to be focused on, right? Sometimes it's about navigating messaging that we hear about utilizing services, right? So if you have family, friends, significant others who are really not aware of what it looks like to engage in mental health support, they may not be supportive, right? So that's something else I'm seeing students navigate. Sometimes if, we're a small team, with respect to the size of the student body.
Right.
So we can't serve all the people all the time with every single issue, right? And so back to Roberto's point, sometimes it's a financial stressor, right? That can seem like a barrier. All of these things, we will work with students to kind of try to find some ways to navigate, right? If folks are willing to just be vulnerable, which is hard, it's a big ask. But if you're willing to be vulnerable about what your needs are, we'll try our best to work with you to get you connected in ways that are meaningful to you.
Could you rephrase the question?
It's kind of like external pressure.
Okay.
Both external and internal pressures that students face on campus. Because I know, like, for some of the people that I know, it's usually like, oh, they have like so much stuff on their plate. The workload is crazy. They have like some club stuff they have to do, and so oftentimes they never really like find like, oh, I need to do this for myself because like I need to be able to do this first, Yeah.
So trying to figure out how to seek mental health counseling with all the demands.
Right.
So I think specifically for students of color, what I have seen also is it's not just enough to be getting all your stuff accomplished. You have to be the best at what you're doing.
Yes.
There's this external pressure from family where it's like, your cousin scored 100 points on their exam, and what are you doing? Yeah. Or
I'm in therapy.
Yeah, it's like, you could just talk to me. You don't need to talk to a therapist. You're fine. But no, I think there's this pressure on students of color to excel because it's almost like not just I have to do well at school, I have to prove that I'm just as qualified to be here as my white counterparts and be taken as seriously. So there is this added pressure of not just being good but being exceptional. And I think that plays a huge role in being able to even take time to take care of yourself. I think a lot of our histories, the way we're socialized in our own communities has been like, look at all the sacrifices that we have done, your sacrifices your families have gone through, what your ancestors have gone through, and they didn't do it for you to sit at home crying for 2 hours. So I think there is this added pressure of like you owe something to your families, to your ancestors, to your community in order to be good all the time. And so there's that pressure that's added that we've internalized and sometimes we don't even recognize is there. And it really gets in the way of us prioritizing our well-being, especially our mental health, for sure.
Yeah, I know that's one thing I deal with because like my family's we immigrated here from like Ethiopia. Like my mom immigrated here from Sudan, so she was like, oh, like we did not take that whole fight for you, like because I know I low-key didn't want to go to uni. My mom's all like, you don't want to go to, you want to go back to Sudan? I'm like, no, I will start my application. I want to go applications, but like it's that type of thing. Like I know, like I was looking interested in therapy. Like when I first started off, she was all like, oh, why do you need therapy? Like
No.
No, that's legit the question she asked. Like, why are you interested in that? Like, why do you go to therapy? Just go talk to your sister if you don't want to talk to me. I'm like, or go talk to your grandmother. It's like, or go visit home, because they usually like to blame like the nation we're in. Like, oh, it's because you're in America. But I'm like, I would still feel this way if we were back home, you know. But it's one of those things that like most, at least within POC communities, I feel like suffering is kind of like something you're supposed to do in silence.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to talk about it because it's like it's shameful. Like, how are you suffering? It's like it's either that, like, if you truly are something, okay, go pray. That's like the second biggest thing that I usually hear in my household is like, go pray or go talk to your family members. If not, like, Sus, like, be quiet. Like, you can't, you know, outwardly express that you're in pain.
Yeah, and that's so important to kind of bring up. Definitely something I wanted to raise. Obviously, we are trained, right, in serving people and helping them better their mental health.
Right.
But I don't want to throw shade or knock people who seek wellness in various ways, right? So whether that be through spirituality or faith-based practices, whether that be connecting with your community, whether people you're related to or your chosen community, if you can positively, in a healthy way, get healing, be thoughtful, be well, go on and do all the things, is my feeling. However, if you want to explore what it looks like to focus on your mental health and wellness with a trained professional, that should be as equal of an option as those other things. That's kind of the vibe we're going for. It's not about us being the sole proprietors of mental health and wellness, because that ain't it either, you know? But just that we're an option. You know what I mean?
I was also going to say this, that I say this now as a joke, but back then I was like, oh, this is terrible. But when I would tell, like, let's just say my dad, like, hey, I'm kind of depressed, he would, like, gaslight the depression away. He would be like, why are you depressed? It's all in your head, man. Like, come on. Like,
what do you got to be depressed about? You got food.
You're in university. Come on, man. Why are you so depressed? What,
Yep.
you feel pressured? It's school. Like, you know, I've been in school. It's not that. It's like, oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. It is all in my head, of course. And then now I'm like, oh, that is kind of funny. But back then I was like, oh, man, yeah, I take everything for granted. It's my fault. And so, like,
It guilts you into it, right?
It guilts you. Like, you're depressed, and then you feel guilty. And then now you're like, oh, it was in my head because, you know.
Absolutely.
All plays a part. All plays a part, and it's quite sad. Well, we're getting towards the analytic segment, but I do. As like, you know, I said we like to end on a bit of a lighter note. So, like, their TV shows have like a bunch of therapists within TV. Do you guys like have some favorites? Do you have like some icks about therapists on TV? Like,
So there's a few. Okay, icks. The therapist from Wednesday. Bad therapist. She was terrible. I did not like her. She shamed Wednesday as soon as she walked into the door. I would have walked out. I would have crawled out of that window too in that bath. That was not the best therapist. I think the best one I've seen on TV has been the movie I think is called The Shrink. Or the show. It's on Hulu. It stars Steve Carell. So Michael Scott, but he's the therapist.
Oh, yeah, and, like, one of his patients is, like, a killer or something like that.
Yeah. Keeps him house. That's one of the best therapists that I've ever seen on TV. Like, he's... I sit there and I'm, like, writing down what he's saying. Like, look at what he did.
that's a good one.
My least favorite example, and I don't know if folks have seen this movie, but there's a movie called The First Wives Club. Came out, like, late 90s, early 2000s, I don't know. And one of the characters goes to couples therapy to try to work on her marriage, and the therapist ends up sleeping with her husband behind her back. Right? So,
you know, I have seen a lot of patterns of that.
Yeah, right? So, like, here's the thing. Obviously, that's a no-no, and bad, ick, therapist. There's probably a ton of other poor examples I could give, because I'm going to tell y'all, therapy is poorly portrayed in media, in my opinion.
I think so too.
I would say a great example, if y'all have seen Insecure, Molly's relationship with her therapist was really top-notch in my estimation. I thought it was actually more real of what it's like going to therapy than some other depictions I've seen.
Those are all good picks. I personally usually watch the shows and I'm like, the therapist, like, I usually try to, I'm like, I would not talk to my therapist like that. Because she would not let that slide. She would personally, because I feel like in TV, like, they just take everything their client's doing. I'm like, mine would walk out.
They portray us as mind readers. Like,
Yeah.
you walk in and you're
Yeah.
quiet, and it's like, so, what did you do last weekend? I already know, but I need you to tell me. And it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
We don't do that.
Go see a
Yeah.
psychic.
Or they always have, like, the big revelation at the end of every single episode from their therapist. I'm like, oh, I don't think that's how it works. I feel like it's a couple of sessions before you get to that revelation. And then you'll get another one for, like, a month or something.
Right.
But, you know.
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest ones though is, have you seen the movie Space Jam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, when the basketball players lose their power, they're like they're getting like physical therapies, like experiments, like CAT scans. Then they go to therapy, and the guy's like, "Do you think your mom might be traumatized you by any chance? Now you can't like play basketball." And they're like, "What are you talking about?"
That's not what I'm saying.
That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's like very like Freudian, very like sit down on this couch as like $5,000. Look at my library of like old books from like the 1700s.
Yep.
And he's like, it was probably your mother that caused this, right?
It's always the parents. It's always the parents.
There has to be a parent. If it's not, it's your sibling.
That's right.
Or a grandparent. Grandparents are a new thing.
Yeah.
Grandparents,
Yeah.
Encanto.
She was traumatized. Like
Yeah.
everyone's like,
Everyone was traumatized.
everyone was traumatized. They were like, oh, let's blame her. Let's blame her. I'm like, she saw her husband get like hacked to death. I feel
Yes.
like she's granted some leniency, but I mean, you live how you want to live.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I just want to end off and say thank you so much for Amir and Tiffany for coming to our show. We really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, we hope, again, I'm going to let them reiterate, you know, who they are, where you can find them, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so my name is Tiffany, and we wanted to leave some resources as well. And I mean, yes, we work here on campus, student counseling services, Black Hall, second floor. However, should you choose to find therapy services off campus, you got some options too. And again, I like my job, I like what I get to do, but we're not the right place for everybody, and we want to honor that, right? So just throw out this resource real quick: therapy for Black girls, therapy for Black men, inclusivetherapist.com. Amir might have another one.
It was inclusivetherapist.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about engaging in therapy, don't feel like if you don't get it with us, you can't get it at all. Go out and just be well. So just wanted to thank y'all for your time. So you can turn it over to Amira.
And I'm Amira, and I also work at the second floor of Black Hall Student Counseling Center, and I'm one of the doctoral interns.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And I'll take the information that Tiffany just had. If you stop in Black Hall 101, we'll make like a sheet of that information. Like we have like a little info desk, so it'll be there. If you come into Black Hall, you can also find that information.
Room 101.
Black Hall 101.
Dope.
I think that's it, right?
That's it. And goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.